Welcome to the Friday vlog.
Welcome to the Friday vlog.
And I'm very happy to report that we have a kitten.
I don't know. I'm less happy, but I am somewhat happy. I'm not thrilled, but I am content that you have a cat. I think.
We have a cat.
We have a cat.
You're bonding with her.
Yes. Last night was a little bit trying for me because she woke me up a bunch of times. I didn't like that. Don't like having my beauty sleep interfered with.
I guess you're a light sleeper.
I am a light sleeper.
But it's not every night, it's just while she's little.
Yes. When did she cross over that threshold from being grown up enough to have her own room?
Well, we said we're going to rotate her around the family bedroom.
That's right, yeah,
so.
that'll work.
Well, we thought it would be actually useful to talk about our kitten today because she's been a wonderful demonstration of how mammals' nervous systems
You just want
work.
to bring every conversation around to the kitten, don't you?
No, that's not true. Maybe. But I think it's a good point.
Okay.
So when we brought her home, she's been in a shelter, I think, for at least a month. So having to make a really big adjustment from being in a little cage to coming into our home. And so we created a safe space for her in our bedroom, much to Angus's chagrin. And initially, as she was adjusting, she would be very passive, and she immediately hid, which is really normal, but she really wanted to be stroked as well, so that sort of would bring her out of hiding to get some affection, and then she'd go back into hiding. But initially when we would hold her, she'd be very kind of shut down and passive. And then as she started to acclimatize and adjust, we started to see her playfulness come out, we started to see her kittenness demonstrate itself in keeping you up at night.
In the middle of the night.
But she's coming into her own, which we know means that she's feeling much safer and she's more relaxed, so she's able to be herself. And then, of course, we have Nico, our dog, and so we've been very gradually introducing them. And so just a few times a day, they have a little bit of time where one of us is holding her with the dog in the room. And on the first day that we did it, the dog got a little bit too close and she hissed at him and we backed off. But again, that was her fight response. Her nervous system was getting activated and was getting into fight response. So for me, it was just really interesting to see all of these different manifestations of what state of safety she was experiencing and how it showed up in her behavior. And it really isn't that different for human beings in terms of how our nervous systems work. And I was thinking about this in terms of relationship. You look like have you got something on your mind?
No, not at all. I'm just trying to tie it all together.
Okay. Is it not making sense?
No, it's making perfect sense.
So with humans, if we don't feel safe, we have all of those same kind of unconscious behaviors that kick into play. So if we're really feeling unsafe, like Angus and I were just talking about this, and there was a time when our younger daughter was about 7 months old, and Angus was looking after her. I was at work, and she got a piece of plastic in her mouth, and it was a transparent. Maybe you should tell the story.
She got a piece of like a little piece of
Cellophane?
plastic, like something like that, stuck in her soft palate. And she was gagging, and in my mind she was choking on something, and all of these thoughts are going through my mind about having to perform an impromptu tracheotomy, and I'm thinking, what do I use? I think I saw it on some film once where they stuck a pen inside the windpipe. So all these thoughts are racing through my mind at phenomenal speed. My knees literally went to jelly.
Yeah.
And thankfully I came to my senses, and when I came to my senses, I obviously looked in her mouth and saw this piece of plastic.
Right.
But for a good few seconds, I was really feeling like my knees were gonna buckle.
And that's one of the ways that the nervous system responds to intense fear. It can shut down. We can go into a freeze response. Other ways of talking about it is playing dead, possum. And so the muscles actually lose tone. That you literally, your knees went weak. They talk about that in terms of how that feels. And so that's something that our nervous system just does when it gets into a place of intense fear. The other response it can have when it's in intense fear is it can go into the fight or flight response where, like the cat's ready to fight with Nico. I don't know how that would go. But, or to run away, which is where all of the blood goes into our muscles so that we can run away and save ourselves. And so there's these very healthy natural responses that we have when we don't feel safe that are not within our conscious control. The body handles it for us. But what happens is in relationship is we have these situations, or with people, like with Ashana, we have these situations where we feel very unsafe and our nervous system responds in the way that it's designed to do, but the actual situation may not be an unsafe situation. And so that's when our senses, based on conditioning, perceive a situation to be unsafe or perceive that we're not okay, when actually we're just getting caught up in our historical conditioning and having a physiological response to that. But then it can really look like it's our partner or somebody else in our life that's responsible for our feeling experience.
Yeah, we're still getting into fight or flight in the way that we perhaps would trigger a response in a physical way. And then, the flight is the need to shout at my partner.
No, that's running away.
Sorry, the fight is the need to shout at my partner, and the flight is shutting down or running away.
Yeah.
But more often than not, it's shutting down.
Yeah, well, shutting down is the knees buckling. That's a whole other response where the muscles literally go. People can pass out from fear.
Really,
It's a dissociation response designed to protect ourselves from pain.
Okay, yeah. So it is kind of the same situation. It's a very good metaphor with the cat. Because I think that people do react always from a place of fear, and then whatever said coping mechanism that comes into play, generally that's just a symptom of that fear. And I guess in terms of us having more awareness around this very, very thing that we're talking about, is that we start to look at it from the point of view, yeah, my partner is suffering at the moment, they're in flight or fight. I don't need to take that personally. I can hopefully have a little bit of compassion for that situation. Not always easy in the moment, but definitely that is the secret source that we keep pointing to.
Well, I think that's it. When we understand that this is an unconscious response, it makes it easier to see our partner's psychological innocence. And I know for myself, what really helped me in terms of our relationship was finding that safety within myself. Because I thought that you needed to be a certain way in order for me to feel safe. So you basically had to be perfect in order for me to feel safe. But what made the biggest difference for me in our relationship was actually on an experiential level connecting with who I am in a deeper way that allowed my whole nervous system to respond to that and to relax. And it happened very quickly in terms of that shift. But after that shift, one of the things that would trigger me into a state of feeling unsafe was if you got angry. And so the next time after I'd had this shift and my nervous system had settled down and I was more connected with that place of well-being inside of myself, the next time you got angry, I didn't have that automatic nervous system response that I've been having. And I actually felt fine inside of myself and could see that you were suffering.
Yeah, you could see my psychological innocence.
Yeah.
And that's such a position of power in the way that we're talking about it. It can be perceived as, oh, that means I'm rolling over, I'm being a doormat. When in actual fact, you're taking, you're reaching a higher vantage point of understanding and seeing that I'm suffering, and that you don't have to take that personally. It might not be behavior that you would feel was appropriate, and that's something to talk about. But in the moment, you're not taking that personally. That's not affecting your sense of well-being.
Yeah, I felt really empowered.
Yeah.
It felt like previous to that, I felt like a victim. But what was the start of it was not anything to do with you. It was actually having that experience within myself of knowing my true nature more deeply and feeling the love and well-being and peace that's there. And that is the same universal space that's available for all of us. And so just want to emphasize the importance of that, especially for relationship, but for life in general. But the more that we give that to ourselves in terms of experiencing what's real and true inside of ourselves, we heal our nervous system that way. And when our nervous system settles down, we're able to be present with what's going on in the here and now, rather than living in a conditioned response that's from the past, which can be very painful and can create problematic behaviors that can then ripple out into relationships and become difficult to navigate. And so that key piece, I think, is just the most important thing for every single one of us. And it doesn't just stop. It's not a one stop and you're done. It's about finding ways to come back to that place of well-being and peace of mind within yourself, and valuing the importance of that, and recognizing how much you get from that and how healing it is. And because it heals and settles our nervous system, because we feel truly safe, the ripple effect is that all of our behaviors that would come from that old conditioning naturally clear themselves up. We don't need a technique or a strategy to handle them. They naturally clear themselves up because the nervous system is in a new way. Just like with the kitten, going to bring the kitten back in, right? She was responding in a healthy way based on her perception of safety. So when she was hiding, that was what she needed to do. When she started to feel safe and her nervous system settled down, she's now running around, playing, biting her toes.
My toes.
She seems to fall in love with you, Angus. But that's just her living more fully into who she is, and that's a shift in her behavior that happened naturally. There was no technique involved. Her nervous system just settled down. Well, it's the same environment. It's not like she was in an unsafe environment when she first came into our home and now she's in a safe environment. It's always been in a safe environment for her. But she didn't see that. And she needed to let her nervous system settle down so that she could perceive that accurately. Well, the same is true for us. We come in to situations and to relationships with all of our conditioning that tells us that we're not safe in certain circumstances, when that may not be the case. It may be, I don't know, but I'm saying it may not be the case. And what we want to do is be able to connect with that safety inside of ourselves so that our nervous systems can settle down, so that we can evaluate more accurately what's really going on.
Yeah. I was thinking in terms of being a student of life, in terms of what we're teaching, is kind of to be a student of the present and not a student of history.
Yeah.
And the present is our ability to develop rapport and relationship with our essential nature. And then the history is all of our programming and conditioning that we might turn to, thinking that that's what will support us best, when really it's having a moment to be in the present and experience what are the nudges and inclinations coming from there.
And the presence is healing, because the presence is being connected with that space of love and peace that is you. And it heals our psychology, it heals our nervous system.
Yeah, well said.
Well, have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend.